situation because you will hear the French president say something on TV, and the next day, the president of those countries will come out and say the same exact thing. And you're like, how dumb do you think we are? We know where this is coming from. But,
Welcome to another episode of the Neoliberal podcast. I am Renaldo, McKenzie, and I have an amazing young man in the car with me, and who is he's an American now, but he's originally from Togo, and I was like, I have never heard of Togo. I don't know where Togo is. I've never heard of Togo. I don't know where Togo is. And so I asked him, where is Togo? He said it's an African country. And I've never heard of. Welcome to the show, G.
Hey, how you doing?
I am doing very, very well. Now tell me, earlier, sorry, I wish I was recording when you were talking first, but I told him about my book. I wrote a book on globalization, talk about the Jamaican situation, and about Haiti and so on and so forth. And when, you guys have heard me talking about Haiti, we've had several shows with the executive director for the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti talking about Haiti. We've had a show with members of my class who is from Haiti talking about Haiti. But we've had several people talking about, but here is it. We realize the Haitian situation sounds just like what's going on in Togo. And I'm like, what's going on with the French and these French colonies? And I said to you, black and brown people are not supposed to be, because when you hear the story, as told by G, we're about to hear the story about Togo and how Togo got independence and how they were colonized by the German first and then the French. And G, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. And tell me, earlier you were talking about Togo and where Togo was, and it's an African country. Tell me about Togo. Where is Togo? It's a French colony. Tell us about Togo.
Togo is a small country.
Yes.
The first thing that you notice about it is really small.
Yes.
A lot of people don't know about Togo, but when you start talking about it, in the context of where it is, right next to Ghana, Benin, or Nigeria, now they're like, oh, okay, that's the area, right?
Okay.
So Togo is a small country that was colonized by Germany first, like you said, until 1914, I think, after the First World War ended, right? So it was under administration of the Society of Nations. That's the word, right? So...
the United Nations?
The first one before the United Nations as it is right now.
Okay. I don't remember, but yes. But we will do our research just before we publish this podcast.
Okay.
Yes, but go ahead.
It's been a long time, so.
Yes.
So, what happened was Togo was divided in two. Part of it was given to the British.
Yes.
And part of it was left to the French.
Okay.
So the British part of Togo was joined to Ghana, and now is, part of Ghana.
Yeah.
The French part, though, that's what I'm talking about. That's what became Togo that we know of today.
Okay. Oh, so the French part is Togo,
and the British part just,
is Ghana.
Yeah, it was joined to Ghana.
Okay.
It was joined to Ghana. So people say British Togo or something like that, but now it's Ghana. So so it got its independence in 1958. I remember when learning about it when I was in high school. It was a really interesting story because our teacher was explaining to us how back then the president Sylvanus Olympio got the independence for us after fighting a long time with the French people. Yeah. It was really crazy, and he was really well educated, so he did all he had to do. And his vision for the country was to make it the Swiss of Africa. Yeah. Basically, he wanted to get out of the French, vision of the world and work more with the British side, because it's something that you will hear a lot coming from people from the French side. It's really slow. Yeah. It's not as fast as it is in Anglo-Saxon world and everything. Yeah. So he wanted to work with a part of the world that was more dynamic, and also the German, because he liked the infrastructure and everything, and he wanted to make Togo something more, how to say it, that weighed more, especially because the country didn't have a lot of like mineral resources like other countries.
Burkina Faso, the commerce hub of the world. The pearl of that area.
He just wanted to make it something small, but like that have weight around. So one of the things that we have like is the sea. We're connected to the sea, and we have a port that is like in deep sea. So he wanted to use that. He wanted to put banks and all of that in Togo. And when you say Swiss, you think about the fact that they don't have an army. So basically, that was one of the ideas that he was going about. The French didn't like that. Let's just put it that way. So we got the independence in 1958. After struggling for a long time, after they tried to like use puppet parties to stop him from having an independence, because as soon as he took it to the United Nations and he was able to get the country's voice heard, they couldn't do anything about it anymore. They had to be like, okay, I guess you guys want to be free, so we're going to decide it through a vote, right? Through an election. And his party won the election.
But it's quite interesting what you just said, you know, the fact that here is it, a Togan man wanted a different vision, a vision that was not in line with French vision, and that was the problem for the French. And so they were working against. So this guy won the election, but before that, the French created their own puppet government.
They created a puppet party, like it was like financed by them, and they were going against him. I forgot the party's name, and it will probably be a little wrong because it's in English.
But you know, just before you, but earlier I asked you, I asked you, when did when did Togo get independence? You said they got independence
in 1958,
but it was not declared until 1961 by the
1960.
1960.
It was proclaimed in 1960.
But that was after they were forced to pay
everything, because
to pay a debt to France. Oh my God. So
because the idea was, I'm not going to start a country with debt. It doesn't make sense. So I will pay you that debt that you say I owe you. Right? That's the best deal we can get right now, even though, we voted and we won and everything. You say we owe you. Okay, I guess we're going to pay it, and then we're going to start from scratch, basically. So that's what he did. The country worked really hard for 2 years, and in 60s, he proclaimed the independence. We still have the videos. It's like really emotional when you watch it. But then, like I said, the goal was to, start working more with other countries and go away from France a little bit. And also, one of the biggest issues for him was monetary independence. Because
But France refused to provide monetary independence.
They don't like that idea. They hate it. So they were like, up till this day, the francophone countries of that area still have this currency that France gave them. Basically, it's not a currency. It's like I call it monopoly money, to be honest with you, because nowhere else in the world can you exchange that money for anything. You can't even exchange it in France, even though it's like made in France. That paper money is made in France, but you can't even exchange it against euro. Basically, it's like a paper holder that we use in our area. And not only that, it's like two kinds. You have one for West Africa, and you have one for, I think, is it for Central Africa? I think so. Don't quote me on that. I have to check. And you can't even exchange it in those two areas, even though you guys are using the same currency and it has the same name. The same name, but it's different.
I mean, but we talk about the French, the colonizers were crazy, and what's going on. But you talk about the issue of what's going on in Niger,
Mali and Burkina Faso.
But anyways, but this is it's quite interesting that what's going on in Togo. and the stories. A lot of Americans and a lot of people in this world, in the Western world, we don't know anything what's going on in Togo.
A lot of people don't know about that story. And the currency that I'm talking about, the funny thing about it is the system of it, not the name, not anything else, but the system of it was based on something that Germany, Nazi Germany, did to France when they took over during the First World War.
Yeah.
So that's funny that that's what they felt like was a good idea to do to African countries.
Oh, wow.
After they were freed from, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So
after they were free from
Germany, they're like, yeah, but we don't really like that system, but you know what?
Yeah.
It would be good for the black people over there.
That is true. A lot of a lot of Africans live in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't even, but it's because we're English speaking. I really think about Germany and their involvement in colonization and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But all of Europe was involved in the underdevelopment of the other parts of the world. Oh my God.
Yeah, all of Africa was, well, apart from Ethiopia.
Yes, except Ethiopia, and that is why Rastafarians call themselves Rasta. I mean, or they look to Ethiopia. That's their place because that's one of the only place that was not touched by the and because of that, they made it sure that to impoverish these people. Fine, they say, okay, if we cannot colonize Ethiopia, then we will make them poor.
Yep.
Okay.
That was the plan.
Yes, we will not trade with them. We will make it difficult for them to have trade with other countries. And I'm telling you, man.
It's crazy.
It's crazy when you look at the world today, and look at Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was jailed fighting against apartheid. The same thing is going on with Hamas, and people are afraid to talk about it. If you talk about it, they call you anti-Semitic, and you are forced to resign.
Yes, it's crazy. But the funny thing about it is, if you look at the stories of all of those places, it's really similar.
Right.
It's really similar. What they're doing here is what they're doing there.
Yes. And you see, as I'm telling you, you don't have to be a historian. You don't have to do much. You are affected by the history of the world.
Well, whether you like it or
not, you're affected by it, and
you're born in it.
Yeah.
So.
And the best people to tell those stories is you. And if you tell your own story and reimagine it, they call it critical analysis or critical race theory, and then in Florida they ban it. And so that's kind of woke ideology. But what happens is that they steal your stuff and then create laws to protect it, create institutions to protect it, create institutions like the church to baptize it. Okay.
But first, they have to make sure you're dead, or you're not relevant anymore.
Or that you are not relevant by redefine it. Okay, or they reclassify or misclassify your identity as well. I mean, I'm telling you, and people don't understand because
people are too busy.
Yeah,
they're too busy with life and everything.
And as soon as their wealth is challenged, their power is challenged, there is a war, or they raise the interest rates.
True.
Yes, they raise the interest rates. The Feds, they create a Federal Reserve to control the money, so that they'll always be ahead. So that they will
always
there's a problem. They raise the interest rates to mop up liquidity, to wipe up any gains that you have.
It's sad, but that's how it is.
Welcome to another episode of the Neoliberal Podcast. My name is Renaldo McKenzie, and today's podcast episode is quite powerful and interesting because I got an opportunity to discuss with a young man from Togo about the Togo situation, and it's quite interesting. When you look at what is happening with Togo, it resembles what's happening with all the other former colonized countries, not just in Africa, but those in the Caribbean, and not just Africa, but with
when you look at the four black and brown peoples in the world today who were formerly subjugated, the experience are the same. Togo got their independence in 1950, but it wasn't until 1961 that it was claimed, because the person who many people are calling dictator, Olympus or whatever the guy's name is, let me see if I can get his name for you. France plotted the assassination of Silvanus Epifanio Olympio, who is Togo's first president. Because, the thing is, when these countries were granting independence, they wanted to grant an independence, okay? An independence that on their own terms, where these countries, these former colonized countries, the independence and the country that they were supposed to have, the independence that was one that's supposed to still serve the interests of the former colonial master. So the French colonies who got independence, they got independence, but the independence was supposed to be on French terms. The English, not so much, but almost the same. And then when an American, when you look at what went on in Grenada, because Togo, French wanted to give Togans independence and to set up their own puppet leadership in Togo, and to have a French identity. But of course, Epifanio did not want that, and that was a problem. The same thing that's going on in Haiti today, where Haiti got their independence, but they had to pay a ransom. Togo got their independence, but they had to pay a ransom or a debt in order for their independence to be recognized. And when you look at all of these former countries that were once colonies of these powerful European countries or post-industrial countries, you see the experience is the same. The experience of Jamaica, the experience of Antigua. I said to you, the book Life and Death, which was the film Life and Death, which talked about Jamaica's struggle for independence. Well, not struggle for independence, post-independence, and how they had to struggle with debt and how they got into debt, and the whole issue of structural adjustment, which was a strategy used to continue the penetration and to keep them down, to make them uncompetitive. These former colonies and peoples who got freedom and independence, they were supposed to continue to serve the interests of the former masters. And institutions are created, and arrangements are made so that their dominance should continue. But the thing is, some of these countries, when they got their independence, they wanted their own identity, and that was a problem. Okay, because they wanted to become competitive and prosperous. They're not their wealth, their freedom, their independence should not rival the wealth of the former. And everything was put in place and done to ensure that does not happen. Okay, when you look at what's going on in Haiti today and how the Haitian president, they tried to assassinate him, Jean-Bertrand Aristide. That didn't work. So they did everything to derail his plans to recoup the debt that they owed that France owed Haiti, because of them having to pay France for their independence to be recognized. The first black country that successfully fought a European colonizer and won. The same. Okay, you see what was happening in Togo. Togans or Epifanio wanted to set up a country in the interest of the Togan that served their interest. That was a problem for France. And so they set up their own puppet government, but their own puppet government lost. And that was a problem. So they tried to assassinate him, and of course they were successful. They tried to assassinate Grenada and the Grenadian Prime Minister, Bishop, and of course they assassinated him because he wanted a kind of country that was not Western in their political ideology, probably a more communist government. But the problem is, the point I'm making, when you look at what is going on in the world today, black and brown peoples or former colonizer subjugated people, I am making the point that these peoples and countries, when even though they got their independence and their freedoms, they only got their independence and freedoms on the terms of those who gave it to them. And where those, and institutions and arrangements were set in place to ensure that although they got their independence and their freedom, they were supposed to still serve the interest of their former master. I tell you, when you study societies, one of the questions you want to ask is in whose interest a society is set up. And where those interests clash, that's a problem. That's what's going on in Russia, Ukraine today, because Ukraine wealth was rivaling that of Russia, and that's a problem. The leadership in Russia wanted their own type of leadership in Ukraine. Ukraine not supposed to have their own leaders and do their own thing. That's a problem. Palestine, you see what's going on in Palestine. Of course, they label Hamas a legitimately elected government. They label them a terrorist, just as how South Africa had labeled Nelson Mandela a terrorist when he was fighting against a rebel, and jailed him when he was fighting against apartheid. So when I say to you, you have to be careful about the narratives that you are being fed. When I say to you, I am very shocked and incensed by by Lizzie McGill, the president of university, being forced to resign. And people are saying, well, she was allowing anti-Semitism. How is she allowing it? A school of smarts, educated, brilliant people who know the truth. How does she manage free speech? She has to toe the line. But I'm telling you, they wanted her to go. But I mean, this is not about Liz McGill right now. But guys, the story today is amazing. It's a powerful. We have a documentary for you, and we're going to continue with the conversation with G. This is the Neoliberal Podcast. Support us, donate to us, and Anchor.fm/the Neoliberal/support. Please donate to us, support us, subscribe. Happy holidays, and thank you for making it the Neoliberal Podcast.
Sylvanus Olympio, the founding father of the independent Republic of Togo, was a gifted orator, fluent in 3 languages, French, German, and English, and strongly anti-French. However, some people did not like him and his rhetoric, and so 3 years after independence, on the 13th of January 1963, they struck. The attack on the Tongolese president's residence in Lomé began at 11 p.m. and the assassination took place the next morning at 7:15 a.m. in front of the gate of the U.S. Embassy, of all places. Between the attack and the assassination, 8 long hours had passed, in which phone calls were made and orders were given. 8 hours about which the United States and France know much, yet remain silent over 50 years on. Olympio's death has been documented as the first death during a military coup in Africa. Witnesses have testified, documents have been declassified, but will we ever know the truth? Also, his assassination opened floodgates to countless coups on the continent by post-industrial countries, amounting to over 200, as well as high-profile political assassinations, among which included Thomas Sankara, Haile Selassie, Abu Bakr Mustafa, Beliwa, Sanduna, among other leaders. And all this, of course, shook Africa. In this episode of the Neoliberal Podcast, we look at the first ever presidential assassination in Africa of Sylvanus Epifano Olympio. Why was it of Sylvanus Epifanio Olympio? Why was he assassinated? Who killed him? And what happened after the aftermath for Togo and the continent? And to answer all this, we need to look at what happened. As Ghana neared independence in 1957, Togo, a former German colony, was being administered by the British and the French. Now, in British Togoland, the British held a referendum that would give the people of British Togoland the option to either remain with Togo or join the soon-to-be independent country of Ghana. Now, a majority of the people voted to join with Ghana, The outcome led to a split of the U people, who were the minority in British Togo between the two countries. For its part, France moved its region of Togo toward independence, attempting to install a puppet regime under the leadership of Nicolas Gonitsky, a relative of Olympio, from 1945 to 1958, which was the case. You see, in 1956, Togo had become an autonomous republic within the French Union. The pro-French Prime Minister, Nicolas Gonitsky, favored a model that would grant the country greater autonomy as a French territory, as they deemed Togo not ready for full independence. The nationalists in opposition insisted on nothing less than immediate and full independence. And so nationalists won the general elections in 1958, compelling the French to sign an agreement for full independence. And on April 27, 1960, Sylvanus Olympio and his party, the Committee for the Unity of Togo, that had struggled hard for the country's freedom from the French colonial empire, officially declared the independence of the Republic of Togo 80 years after successive German, British, and French control. Before and after independence, Olympios wasn't short of enemies. In 1961, there was an unsuccessful attempt on Olympio's life, in which Gonitsky's Togolese Progress Party and the Girento under Antoine Michi were accused. In response, Olympio outlawed centralized power and established a one-party state undercut. Just after independence, in May 1960, Togo's first president told Anguisse Agin AFP, "I will do my best to ensure my country can thrive without France." Now, unlike the Guinean Sékou Touré, he did not openly oppose France. In early 1963, Olympio considered leaving the franc zone, CFA, and creating a Tongolese currency backed by the Duché mark. Now, Togo, through its balance in policy, risked offering a model of emancipation to all former French colonies. And ultimately, according to Paris, Olympio was more dangerous than Succo. This explains Foucault's sneer the day that he welcomed Olympio on the steps of the Élysée in 1960, describing Olympio. Foucault said, "Sylvanus Olympio was not one of our friends. With him, my relations were never as cordial as those I had with Nicolas Gonitsky." In addition to the French, in 1962, Olympia was faced with a challenge when several hundred Tongolese army veterans were repatriated back to Togo following the demise of the French colonial empire, that is. Now, when the soldiers demanded to be part of the newly formed Tongolese army, Olympio refused, and even rejected a compromise that would have incorporated just 60 of the most qualified veterans. Olympio argued that Togo, small in size and poor in resources, had to develop slowly, so that it would not become dependent on the French. He saw in their demand the conniving hands of his former pro-French opponents that were attempting to destabilize his government. For him, mercenaries who had fought against freedom fighters had no place in a respectable army. This disagreement, furthermore, to him, having an army was a luxury. The country could not afford it, he argued. Togo's shaky economy, of which only 7% of the country's 1.5 million persons had regular jobs, did not permit a large military budget. Olympios was in fact opposed to the entire idea of having a national military, but with threats from Nkrumah being a concern, he caved in and agreed to a small military of 250 soldiers. And we shall come back to Nkrumah later in the episode. Now, the military returnees, unhappy with these plans to make them with Olympio, but their pleas fell on deaf ears. Prominent among them were two officers, Emmanuel Bodjolet, 35, and Iyadima, 28, who had spent time in Indochina and Algeria fighting nationalists on behalf of the French. In 1963, on Saturday, January 12 at 11 p.m., 6 rebel soldiers led by Beaujolais himself entered the presidential residence, a villa surrounded by pines about 150 meters from the Atlantic Ocean. A noise outside his gate disturbed Sylvanus and his wife Dina, who were already in bed. There was a heated discussion between his two guards and up to 10 armed men in combat fatigues. Now, as the assailants talked among themselves and then took several minutes to break through the heavy front door, Olympio, sensing danger, instructed his wife and other family members to hide. He then had time to put on a pair of beige Bermuda shorts and shirt, rushed downstairs, barefoot, climbed through a window, crossing the garden and climbing the wall and landing on the other side, which happened to be the garden and parking lot of the U.S. Embassy. While there, he hid in the car. Meanwhile, the armed men enter the house, find Dina, Olympios, his wife, shoot at her, and of course, fired point blank into the closets. According to Dina, they asked where her husband was, replying that she didn't know. According to her, he's been downstairs for over an hour. I don't know where he is. Elsewhere in the city, the coup was well underway, with the rebel soldiers having everything under wraps. The entire cabinet of ministers under arrest and the military camp taken in the rebel soldiers' hands for hours. However, Olympios, the ultimate prize, was still missing, and until they found him, they are in fear of their lives, and they're not sure if the coup is successful. They began to fear for their lives, worrying whether Olympio would succeed in turning the tables on them. The soldiers concluded that the president cannot be far away, so they deployed a search. A party of 4 among them was Sergeant Etienne and Ayadema. The search party scaled the wall and head straight for the car where Olympio is hiding. They pull him out, and as day breaks, demand that he exit the grounds of the American embassy. But who gave him away? How did the search party know where and which car he was in exactly? Well, at 3:30 a.m., according to the account of his daughter, Sophia, then U.S. Ambassador Leon D. Polada, received a phone call at his residence, which was about 2 miles from his office. Now, according to Olympio, the son of the president, at the end of 1964, almost 2 years after my father's death, he says, I met Polada in Washington. He had just left the State Department and was still traumatized. He talked to me for 3 hours and told me that it was the French ambassador, Henri Mazoyer, who had warned him that night that a coup was underway and that the president might have taken refuge at his embassy. Now, when Polada arrived with his vehicle in front of his embassy, he came face to face with 2 shits who seemed drunk or high, and they threatened him. After an exchange, he entered the embassy grounds. Olympio immediately told him what had happened. The ambassador advised him not to move from the car and to wait until he returned with keys to open the building. According to Sophia, Polada did not open the building because he was afraid that the coup plotters would ransack it So, returning to his residence, unwittingly or so the theory goes, he had called the French ambassador to ask for advice. Not knowing that France was behind the coup and thus had given away the Togolese president's location or whereabouts, so at 6:40 a.m. Palada called a young American diplomat, Vice Consul Richard L. Storch, who was living in a building just across the street from the embassy, asking him to keep an eye on what was going on. Storch watched armed men come and go on. Now, go on the street, and at 7 p.m. he saw a civilian in shorts and bare feet, one of the coup plotters, and at 7:15 a.m. he went to the kitchen to make himself a cup of coffee. That's when he heard 3 gunshots at regular intervals. The shots were too far apart to be fired. Against a fleeing man. So he said in the report he wrote that the founding father of Togo, had been shot dead at the hands of Sergeant Etienne Nasingbe Ayadame. Now, in the days that followed, Sergeant Ayadame or Ayadima boasted, and in the Time magazine, that he had shot the president, shot him because he didn't want to move. That's what he had said, according to reports. And in 1992, he retracted his statement on RFI. So what it really meant, in the absence of a direct witness, and will we ever know? But the fact is that his claim made during the first hours of the coup brought him prestige in the troop and undoubtedly helped him gain precedence over soldiers and more senior comrades during the overthrow of Gunetsky in 1967. And after the successful coup d'etat, the military junta announced the arrest of Olympia supporters, including Olympia's son, Benito. Now, Olympia was buried in his native village of Agua on January 15th, and about 2,000 people attended the funeral. In the end, we could say that President Sylvanus Olympio's tampering with the military hastened his downfall, and more governments would meet their demise due to the same blunder. Chief among him was Nkrumah and Haile Selassie. As is usually the case with most military men, they possess limited skill and knowledge. So they called upon Emmanuel Baudelaire and 9-member junta committee immediately for them to be returned from exile, the 3 exiled Togolese political leaders, to form a new government. And that includes Nicolas Gunitsky, brother-in-law of Olympio, who had been in exile in Benin for several years. And they returned on January 15th and agreed to form a civilian government, a regime to replace the military junta with Antoine Michy as his deputy. Now, as soldiers preferred Michy, French intervention favored the candidacy of Gunitsky, and this is important. The soldiers preferred Michy, but the French preferred somebody else. The selection of Gunitsky after the coup reinstated the pro-French leadership from the pre-independence era. And during this time, the Togolese military tripled in size, largely by recruiting French colonial army veterans. And after implementing a multi-party system, by 1966, Gunitsky's cabinet unraveled, with members of former President Olympio defecting over acute disagreements arising from the performance of cabinet members in key posts. As popular unrest increased by factions loyal to Olympio's cut party, these dissenters seized the national radio and called the public demonstrations. Mass crowds responded to the radio appeal and listened to address made by leading opposition party members. Now, the military eventually intervened to take back the radio station and quell demonstrators, and the unpopularity of Gunitsky's government had become a liability for the military leaders, who could not allow the former president's party to assume power, fearing retaliation for the assassination of Olympio. So shortly afterwards, on the 4-year anniversary of the Olympio assassination, the military overthrew the Gunitsky government. Gunitsky was allowed to leave the country with several close aides. Now, although elections were promised by Army Chief Kleber Dajo Iedame, who consolidated executive power and established his own authoritarian government, soon broke the promise. The role of Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah, the involvement of Ghanaian President Kwame Nkrumah in Togolese politics at the time, was very instrumental. Ghana was implicated in the coup d'etat and assassination, but no evidence was gathered to support these allegations. The relationship between Olympio and Nkrumah had been strained for some time. And of course, you can see Olympia had hopes of uniting the U people in French and British Togoland. However, Nkrumah destroyed the dream, or that dream, when he courted British Togoland. And in 1956, when a referendum was held, and the territory voted for a union with the Gold Coast. Now, this caused a rift between the two West African leaders, with Olympio calling Nkrumah the black imperialist. And they failed to resolve their differences, blaming failed assassination. Now, attempts on each other and hosting political exiles from one another.
Thank you for listening to another episode, or watching another episode of the Neoliberal Round podcast. One that was quite revealing, one that was quite interesting. We've been talking about Haiti. I know we're talking about Togo, which presents an important backdrop to critically analyzing post-independent countries, critically analyzing the Haitian situation, and looking at how former colonial masters or some post-industrial countries continue to maintain their dominance through various means, through various strategies. Case in point, by when you study how many of these countries got their independence and what pertains today. We talk about society. When you study societies, you ask in whose interest they are set up, and whose interest. And when these colonies got independence or negotiated their independence, what was certain, it seems, when you start to study their independence, is that it's as if all of them had an ultimatum. It's as if they were forced, they were threatened, they were cornered into accepting the terms of the former colonial master, accepting the terms. They were supposed to set up a country in the eyes and in the interest, and that was identical to that of their former master. Anything else would put them at odds. So it means that they would have to pay huge debt, like what Togo had to do, in order to gain reputation and recognition, which what Haiti had to do, and several other countries had to do. I'm learning, because he's gonna be back on the show, talking about talking some more about how Haiti. What's going on in the other African countries, these former colonies. This is quite interesting, and something that we're going to continue to discuss, and we'll actually pick up as a topic in Caribbean Thought when I resume teaching next semester at Jamaica Theological Seminary. But we will have part 2 of the show, so this is not the end. We stopped abruptly just now. We just want to also say thanks to the Afro Story Productions people, the Afro Story Production people, who are also on YouTube with this particular video, but it doesn't have background music, and I did it, and it's a retake and a remake, and it's edited, for American market, for the British market, for the Caribbean market, for the Canadian market, and so on, and also as part of the general discussion on Caribbean thought, Pan-African thinking, so on and so forth. But this is a very important point, a very important observation that I don't think we've had a time to delve into, but we actually picked it up, and it's a discussion that we are having in Neoliberal Globalization Reconsidered, the second book to neoliberalism, book 1, which I am looking to release before the end of the year this year. But thank you for listening or for watching. This is the Neoliberal This is the Neoliberal Round podcast, brought to you by the Neoliberal Corporation. We are serving the world today to solve tomorrow's challenges by making popular what was the monopoly. Visit us at theneoliberal.com or renaldocmckenzie.com. And just so you know, this podcast is available on over 12 streams and available in over 12 countries. You can find your stream by going to anchor.fm/the neoliberal. I think it's now called Spotify for podcasters, but I can never remember the link to that. But if you type in anchor.fm/the neoliberal, you will find us, and you can donate to this show by going to anchor.fm/the neoliberal/support. And by the way, we want to give a shout out to Mr. Winston McKenzie for being a contributor to this show. He over the past 2 years, he has faithfully donated and contributed to the show, and we want to give a big shout out to him and hope that he will continue to support us and that he will be blessed as he does so. We pray that you will also join him and become a supporter, subscriber, and share the show with your friends. Let us know how we can improve it, and please donate so that we can improve the show. Please visit us, subscribe, let us know how we can improve the show, and thank you for being faithful followers and supporters of this program. Happy holidays, and all the best for the new year. Walk good.